Let's be honest here. The NFL culture around violent collisions, and really just hitting in general, has changed big time. Brutal hits used to be a celebrated part of the game by broadcasters and the NFL alike. Every week before Monday Night Football, ESPN ran a segment called Jacked Up, and all of America oohh'd and aahh'd as Chris Berman and company narrated the week's biggest, most vicious hits. The violence of football was never a secret, but the side effects of it were, or at least it seems like that's what the NFL wanted. But now, as the public opinion is swayed, the NFL and unsurprisingly ESPN have drastically shifted their portrayal of these hits. Almost any questionable hit now comes with a flag or a fine or both. And while this shift is probably for the best for the sport and the athletes that play it, there's a certain kind of player that probably wishes nothing changed. Vontaze Burfict is certainly one of those players. The talented linebacker rose to prominence in a Cincinnati Bengals uniform, but just earned a season-long suspension as an Oakland Raider following an ejection for a helmet-to-helmet hit on Indianapolis Colts tight end Jack Doyle. The guy just seems completely incapable of playing within the confines of today's game. I mean, throughout his NFL career, he has repeatedly been fined for bad behavior, racking up more than $4 million in lost salary due to fines and forfeited game checks. Including the most recent ruling, by the end of 2019, Burfict will have been suspended for 24 games, a full season and a half. Perhaps if he had played in a different era, he would not be facing all of the scrutiny he is today. But at this point, it is on him to adapt if he gets another shot in the NFL, that is. Like I said, the culture of the game has changed, and in the annals of NFL history, there were plenty of guys that played with a similar ferocity to Vontaze. There were two in particular that stick out as the dirtiest players in NFL history, other than Vontaze Burfict, of course. The first, a legendary linebacker who won 4 Super Bowls and was a 2-time Pro Bowler, and also had a reputation for 2 things: his 243 consecutive game streak, and the fact that he was perhaps the most vicious player of his era, Bill Romanowski. Romanowski does seem to have a few more demons than Burfict, who by all accounts has been a consummate teammate. Bill was involved in numerous altercations with his teammates, and that's on top of all of the ones he had with his opponents. Romanowski, who was often referred to as Romo, played middle linebacker for the Denver Broncos from 1996 to 2001, and he followed that up with a stint on the Raiders from 2002 to 3. He was a force for whatever defensive unit he was leading. Throughout his career, Romanowski compiled 1,105 tackles, 39.5 sacks, 18 forced fumbles, and 18 interceptions, and he was almost always the leading voice on the team, good or bad. Not only was Romo a very effective linebacker, he made it clear from the second he stepped on an NFL field, he wasn't there to simply tackle ball carriers. Romo had countless incidents, whether it was slimy instigations, like when he spit in longtime San Francisco 49er wide receiver J.J. Stokes' face, and there were also the violent transgressions, like the time he snapped former Giants running back Dave Meggett's finger, or when he kicked Cardinals fullback Larry Centers in the head. He was out for blood. He didn't care how he got it, dirty, clean, whatever it was. The linebacker saw football for what it was back then, a gridiron filled with gladiators. It was eat or get eaten, and regardless of how the perception of dirty plays in the NFL has changed, Romanowski has remained unapologetic for his playing style. He summed up his playing philosophy by saying, quote, "It's about trying to make big hits, like when you hit someone so hard he doesn't get up. Those are the kind of hits you like," end quote. He never backed down from that position. When questioned about his dirty reputation, he responded frankly, saying, quote, "It's fair when you're going 150 miles an hour on every play. For 60 minutes, hey, did I cross the line? Absolutely. I was a guy who never wanted to fall below the line," end quote. Never fall below the line is right. Romanowski simply refused to abandon his recklessness, regardless of the fact that he was fined well over $100,000 in his NFL career. On top of that, he also paid out big time in a lawsuit with former teammate Marcus Williams. He pressed charges against Romanowski for an altercation that arose during a team scrimmage and resulted in the linebacker punching Williams in the face and crushing the tight end's eye socket, thus ending his career. Williams sued for damages of $3.4 million, arguing that Romanowski had been suffering from roid rage when he attacked him. Eventually, he had to settle for just $340,000 instead. Romanowski played long before the likes of Vontaze Burfict, Ndamukong Suh, and James Harrison, but they all have one thing in common. They were all fierce, if not out-of-control competitors who thrived off of their opponent's fear. These guys feel it gives them an advantage over their opponents, and they have all been willing to take a flag here and there to preserve it. Romo explained it like this, quote, "I wanted people to fear me. I wanted them to have to watch out for me, to think about me. These were different things I had to use to get an edge," end quote. That just about sums up Romanowski and a lot of other players on the defensive side of the ball that earned reputations for being dirty players. They were all desperate for that edge. In addition to his antics on the field, Romanowski has had a hard time steering clear of controversies off of the field as well. There have been numerous allegations that he has displayed racist behavior, most recently when he referred to Cam Newton as "boy" following the Panthers' loss in Super Bowl 50. And while this may seem like an isolated incident, there have been so many reports from teammates and media pundits alike of racially charged incidents involving Romo that it does kind of seem like a "when there's smoke, there's fire" situation. He and his wife were also investigated for prescription drug fraud in the early 2000s following the Balco investigation. And although the charges were later dropped, he later had to admit to using steroids and human growth hormone on 60 Minutes. All things considered, Vontaze Burfict might not look so bad now, huh? There's another guy whose name will come up anytime you ask a longtime NFL fan about dirty players from the old days. This one, however, was an offensive player, but like Romanowski, he relished in his reputation, offensive lineman and primarily right guard, Conrad Dobler. Dobler was a 3-time Pro Bowler for the St. Louis Cardinals. Yes, the football team used to be called the St. Louis Cardinals. Dobler also played the last few years of his career with the New Orleans Saints and Buffalo Bills. Dobler was drafted in the 5th round out of the University of Wyoming in 1972 and developed a nasty reputation almost immediately. Similar to Romanowski, Dobler never ran from it. He reveled in it. He flaunted it. And yes, of course, he used it as his edge. Check out his comments to the Los Angeles Times back in 1988. Quote, "I needed an edge and I found it," he says. "I played 10 years on the best offensive line ever in football." End quote. Sound familiar? But he also used it tactically. The Cardinals had a rather pass-heavy offense, particularly for a team of that era. So it was vital that Dobler and the rest of the offensive line kept the opposing defensive line at bay, and of course Dobler had a special method for helping to do so. Here's how he explained it. Quote, "I see defensive linemen jump to knock a pass down. When that happened near me, I'd smack them in the solar plexus, and that got their hands down real quick. It's as if nobody wants to see anybody else get injured." End quote. Imagine a player today saying that. They would be suspended before they could even offer up a half-hearted apology. Another one of Dobler's legendary tactics was known as the leg whip. In a rare situation that he was fooled by the move of an opposing lineman, or if the lineman bull rushed him and knocked him off his block, Dobler would whirl around his body like a tornado and let his leg flail out in a way that it would catch the pass rusher in the knees or chest, or wherever he could catch him. His third and perhaps most malicious tactic was absolutely hated by his opponents. Mean Joe Green famously commented on this move, saying, quote, "What's the matter with you, Dobler?" End quote, in a fit of confusion and rage. The move was a technical jab of his fingertips or his knuckles right into an opponent's Adam's apple, similar to the move used by the Gestapo to make their victims talk. It wasn't just his propensity to physically attack his opponents that made him such a dirty player, he would verbally accost them at every opportunity as well. He would try to psychologically break them. He explained his verbal warfare by saying, quote, "I used to find some reason to get mad at that guy across from me. He had freckles. He didn't have freckles. He talked too much. He didn't talk enough." End quote. Sports writer Paul Zimmerman summed up Dobler like this, quote, "Conrad Dobler was mean. He tried to hurt people in a bad way. He made teams that he played on better. He played hurt, didn't complain, but he was a filthy, filthy player." End quote. Unsurprisingly, Dobler also had his fair share of incidents, each of which grew in notoriety as his reputation started to precede him. And just like Romanowski, he had a spitting incident when he hawked a loogie onto a downed and injured opponent, linebacker Bill Burgee. Not to mention a kicking incident as well, when he kicked Merlin Olsen, another downed opponent, right in the head. Dobler's antics became so infamous that he became a parody in a Miller Lite beer commercial, and Olsen even got a moment of revenge when he placed Dobler's name on a headstone in a scene in Merlin's television series, Father Murphy. On the tombstone's inscription it read, "Here lies Conrad Dobler, gone but not forgiven." Yeah, I guess it's safe to say that old Conrad rubbed a few guys around the league the wrong way. Not only did his antics cause him distractions off of the field, it eventually became the reason he claims he retired from the NFL. He felt that it got to the point that he could no longer even try to play within the confines of the rules because everything he did immediately was called a penalty. Dobler explained the end of his career like this, quote, "There'd be a play where another lineman would have part of another player's shirt in his hand, and they would call the holding on me. And when you start stalling your team's touchdown drives with phantom penalties, you've had it." End quote. Many onlookers were in agreement, at least to some degree. Jim Murray of the LA Times compared the end of Dobler's career to that of an old mob boss saying, quote, "He was like the mafia don who lives his life in the lenses of the FBI photographing his every move. He couldn't function." End quote. Unlike Romanowski, Dobler seemed to have a little problem staying out of trouble off of the field. but he apparently carried his moxie, if that's what you want to call it, through every facet of his life. Dobler did, however, end up paying a pretty steep price for the gladiator style of play deployed during his NFL days. He has undergone 9 knee replacements. Dobler is still in need of further surgeries, but like many other disabled pro football veterans, he's been unable to gain disability assistance from the NFL. At the end of the day, it's tough to say if either of these guys are dirtier than Burfict. They played in different eras. Imagine what kind of conflicts Burfict would have gotten into if he wasn't getting suspended and fined every other game. Either way, these were 2 dirty players who took no prisoners and were absolute menaces on Sundays. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to hit subscribe down below. If you liked the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune into TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.